Good day. We're gonna try from the porch. I haven't invested in a microphone, so apologies up front. And apologies to my editing self later. It's probably gonna be interesting. Hopefully we don't lose anything important. We got some wind and some twinkly bells. Anyway, it's Day of the Dead. Well, it's the second Day of the Dead. It's All Souls Day, which is my favorite of the two. I am currently drinking my coffee and looking at the Missouri Advanced Directive that I need to fill out. I've been meaning to fill this out for some time. And you know what? I was like, All Souls Day, not a bad time to do that. So I'm in an interesting situation because I live in Missouri, but 3 blocks that direction is Kansas. So what is an advanced directive? Living will is another term that's used for it. Basically, an advanced directive is a guide for someone else whenever you end up in a situation where you cannot make decisions on your own behalf. So whether you are unconscious or perhaps you have dementia, Alzheimer's, something like that going on, where you are not of sound mind in that moment to make a decision when a decision actually needs to be made. So I took a course through Going with Grace. They are one of the programs out there these days that is focusing on training death doulas. And it was a 6-month course, 12 units, 1 unit a week for 3 months, and then 3 months of still having access to like group calls and support directly through them as a student. And I learned a lot about a lot of different parts of this whole death situation. I learned a lot about being with dying, being comfortable with the uncomfortable, being curious about it, and then more practical things about like how the medical system interacts with death, what happens when someone dies, like what are the things that need to happen, funerals, cremation, different types of body disposition is how we refer to it, where this physical thing ends up when you're no longer in it. Even how to do your own home funeral or virtual services, how to work on legacy, how to deal with burnout as a caregiver, what are your hospice options. It was just loaded with information that some of which was overwhelming and some of which was really it really resonated with things I want to help people with. But the thing that surprised me the most is that this document stuck out to me throughout everything that I learned as one of the absolutely most important things to make sure you check off your list. I have seen situations where this document was created and used, and I have seen situations where this didn't exist, and families, the stress that puts people in whenever they have to figure out what a person would want for themselves when they've never even talked about it. Let me try to describe when this document would come into play. You are in a state where you cannot reason with the amount of information that a medical team might be trying to give you. A doctor, surgeons, and you're probably in a situation where time is of the essence of whether or not to take action, what kind of action to take, and the stakes are the highest they will ever get, because depending on what is decided, you may or may not survive the experience. So it's clearly like it's a stressful situation for all involved, and you are not there mentally to contribute to what the next steps should be. You may have family members there, you may have other loved ones, friends that are there being called upon and given all this information. They're probably in some state of hardship themselves because of the situation that you're in, their concern for you, their love for you, their fears for you, and whether or not this document is on file, or even, like, say you filled it out but no one knows where you put it, like, those people have no guide from you as to what it is that you would want done. That is a lot of why it really stuck out to me, because a lot of things about death aren't actually urgent, really. Like, especially when someone's gone. There's not really a sense of urgency. Now that we've covered that. Advanced directives! Yay! So, advanced directives. How does this work? It's every state has their own. Gotta look yours up. I got mine from caringinfo.org. I think that's what was recommended in my unit on this in my class. There are other options, like you can just Google it, advanced directives, your state. And there'll be forms available to you that you can print off. Just a note, they don't all work the same. I think the thing to understand is that some of them will require a notary seal, like Missouri here requires a notary. So I can't sign this until I am somewhere with a notary and the person that I am appointing as my power of attorney, essentially, in the case that I cannot do that for myself. Kansas, let's look at Kansas here. So for Kansas, you have a choice on Kansas side where you can either have your signature witnessed by a notary public, or you can sign the document or direct another to sign it in the presence of two witnesses. As long as those witnesses aren't the person signing your form for you, the person that you appoint as your healthcare agent, someone that's entitled to any portion of your estate, is directly financially responsible for your healthcare, or related to you by blood, marriage, adoption. So basically, they have to be non-family members with no stake, but you don't have to have a notary in Kansas if you get those two people to sign off on your advanced directive, and that's all it takes to make it legal in Kansas. We'll get into that, like the details of like what kind of things you have to think about while you're filling one of these out. Because I've been looking at mine for over a year now, and it is just like it's a weird thing to have to think about. It can be scary for sure. So a lot of this is like you're trying to imagine what you would want in a situation that you've never even like considered, or you don't even really understand what that might mean for you. You know, like I'm not on antibiotics, but it's asking on the Missouri one if I would want them to try to use antibiotics. And like, then I get into the can of worms of like, well, in this scenario, maybe I would, but in this scenario, maybe I wouldn't. And I think at the end of the day, genuinely, you just have to understand how you want to die. Like, the circumstances, which you will not be able to control or predict. But you just have to figure out, in an ideal world, where's your line as far as what is worth living through and what is not, you know? So, yeah, it's a lot, right? That's why people avoid this. But, like, if you don't have one, I already gave you the scenario. Like, it's a lot of stress that they're going to have to make those decisions anyways on your behalf. And, like, maybe, like, there have been, like, Terry Schiavo is a great example of someone who was very young. She was in her 20s, I think, when she ended up in a comatose state. And I think it was, like, 18 years. Like, her family, her husband knew that she wanted to die, like, in that situation. She didn't want to keep going, but her family, on the other hand, believed the opposite, that she would want to live no matter what. And so she was in, like, a comatose limbo state, vegetative state of sorts, for over a decade, because there was no document that ultimately said from her, this is what I would want. And I get it, like, she was young, so why would she have even done that? 20 years older than she was whenever that all went down, and I'm not done it yet. So, but in situations like that, that's an extreme, but, like, you can kind of see there's, like, a whole spectrum of stuff that you just don't know is going to happen, not happen, who's going to, because there's a line of succession in every state. If this document doesn't exist, then there's a line of succession as to who is supposed to have the say on your behalf, and it starts with spouse, and then I think it goes parent, child, and then from there, you know, if you have an appointed, like, say you don't have a good relationship with your family, this is a really, really, really important document to have on hand, you know, if you don't want any of them having a say over what happens with you in this kind of situation. So, do it. Do it, please. For yourself, for your loved ones, do it. As far as choosing your person, so the way they put it in my class was it should be your, like, buffet buddy, is how they put it. Like, say that, like, someone's offered to go to the buffet and get you some food, you can't go yourself, and you don't have time or the ability to tell them what you want, who do you send to that buffet to choose what you want? And beyond that, the buffet is on fire, okay? So, like, who is that person? And it may not be your spouse. It may not be your parent. It may not be your child. It may be not your firstborn child. It may be a different one. I was at a party with some friends, and of course I'm the one who brings up death at some point in the situation, and I got to talking to some folks about, it was some sisters, about advanced directives, and they're both married, they both have kids. One of them, I was talking to her while the other one was talking to someone else, and I was like, I told them the buffet situation, and she brought up milkshakes. I was like, yeah, would your husband know what milkshake you would want if he went and got you one? Or would he get you what he would want? She sat there and she thought about it for a minute, and she said, you know, actually, he always brings me a chocolate milkshake. And I was like, what's his favorite milkshake? And she said, chocolate. I was like, and that's not your favorite, is it? And she said, no. And at that point, her sister had started to tune back in a little bit. She didn't know what we were talking about, but the first sister turned to her and said, what kind of milkshake would you get me? She thought for a second, and then she said, cherry. And she was like, yeah, that's right. I was like, so maybe your sister here is the better person to put as your power of attorney for your healthcare choices when the time comes, you know? And take that pressure off of your husband. You know, I think people get caught up in You know, if they choose someone besides the obvious choice, they're gonna hurt someone's feelings. But like, really, maybe you're helping that person in the situation in the long run. Of course, they'll still be included in decisions, but the ultimate say should go to your buffet buddy. Find your buffet buddy out there. I also want to point out that there's a difference between your power of attorney for healthcare choices and your power of attorney for financial decisions. And you can appoint different people to those roles. Right now, I am just looking at healthcare. I'm not looking at my financial side, but for me, my buffet buddy right now is my sister, who I live with. She is not the next sister in line age-wise, but she's actually the next youngest sister in our crew. And I know that she knows what I like, even though we like very different things. Like, she would bring me a chocolate and peanut butter blizzard, even though she might want something with fruit in it herself. Because I don't like fruit in my stuff. Keep it away from my ice cream. She knows that about me. So, I know that as long as I am able to give her guidance, that she would try to do what I would want in the situation, not try to override it with what she would want. And I also know that she would seek counsel from my other loved ones before she made a decision, if she was able to take the time to do that. Okay, so let's do this. One of the recommendations in my class was to use a pencil. It's totally okay, it's still legal. So, part 1, durable power of attorney for healthcare choices. So first step is I, and then a line for me to write my name. I'm going to write the full name. How often do you get to use your middle name? And I am appointing my sister, full name. It says address, which right now we live together, so that's convenient. I know that one off the top of my head. Alright. I appoint them as my agent for healthcare choices when I am unable to make decisions or communicate my wishes. In case the person above cannot serve as my agent, or if I'm divorced or legally separated from the agent above, in case it's my spouse, I appoint the person below. I forgot that this is a thing. Well, so in the case that I am in peril before my mother, who is still with us, she was a paramedic for 10 years, and she is my Ask a Nurse, so she will be my second in command if my sister cannot. Thankfully, I know that address as well, right off the top of my head. I feel like that is a really good sign. This alternate agent may make healthcare decisions for me when I am unable to do so or communicate my wishes. This durable power of attorney becomes effective when 2 physicians certify that I am incapacitated and unable to make and communicate healthcare choices. You may choose to have 1 physician instead of 2, whether you are incapacitated. If you want to exercise this option, allowing 1 physician to determine whether or not you are incapacitated, initial here. I'm going to go ahead and initial it, and there's some blank space. You can add what you want here, and I'm just going to make a note. I am letting them know that I fully advise and support that they seek out a second opinion if they feel that is advisable, that I also understand that they may be in a situation where time is of the essence, and I trust their judgment. I feel like if I was the one that was the power of attorney and I read that in a crisis situation, it would at least give me a little peace. You know what I mean? So, that's it. So next on part 1, by completing this durable power of attorney, I authorize my agent to make all decisions for me regarding my health care. This includes the power to consent, refuse, or withdraw consent to artificially supplied nutrition and hydration, which one of the things that I've learned through this experience is there are points where it actually is more painful to the person who's dying to keep them on artificially supplied hydration and nutrition, and in not all but a lot of cases it actually causes them more discomfort and pain and keeps them in that state longer because their body is still receiving nutrition. So it's one that I personally feel very strongly about. Next is make all necessary arrangements for health care on my behalf, including admitting me to the hospital, psychiatric treatment facility, hospice, nursing home, or other healthcare facility. This comes into play when I'm still younger. It could mean that I have a breakdown, or I get into an accident that gives me like a traumatic brain injury and alters my ability to function. It could also mean that it comes into play much later, like when I'm much older and I'm in a situation where it's no longer safe for me to be living alone and need to be somewhere where I can be kept an eye on a bit more. There is Alzheimer's in my family, so I saw that play out with my grandma. And she did have one of these, thankfully, and she had chosen the right person. Next is they are able to hire or fire healthcare personnel on my behalf. Doctors, whatever. They are also able to request, receive, and review my medical and hospital records, so they'll have access to all the information, but they will probably have to ask for it, just FYI. They don't just give you that, usually. Like, it's like pulling teeth sometimes. But I think a lot of people don't ask, so they're just used to it not being a thing. They are also able to take legal action if necessary to do what I have directed, and carry out my wishes regarding autopsy, organ donation, and decide what should be done with my body. So clearly I need to communicate some of this stuff to my sister and my mom, just in case, but I know in my family at least that these sorts of situations are handled pretty collaboratively and thoughtfully, even whenever it's stressful. So I feel okay about that, and have made a lot of this clear to my sister already. She knows where I want to end up, how I want to end up, and even I have a backup plan, an alternative, just in case. So one other thing to note on this section is that it tells me to the left that if I don't want my agent to have any of these powers, to just draw a line through that provision and initial next to it. So in someone else's scenario, if they were uncomfortable with any of these that I just read, line through, initial. So next is my agent under this durable power of attorney will not incur any personal or financial liability. The agent should also not be compensated for services performed for me. However, the agent shall be reimbursed for reasonable expenses that are part of my care. So basically, if your estate runs out of money, they aren't financially responsible to pay for your health care. Like, you would need to be going on Medicaid, which they would have to sort that out for you. They also, the part where they can't be compensated for services performed for me, they can't be paid for their time in helping care for me, basically. They have to hire someone else out to do that using money from my estate, but they themselves should not be, there's a conflict of interest there, where it can be taken advantage of. It's to protect you and your estate, ultimately, as well as them, legally. This is a durable power of attorney and the authority of my attorney in fact when effective. Jeez, man. This is what life is like and death. Wind blowing without your control. So, this is a durable power of attorney and the authority of my attorney in fact when effective shall not terminate or be void or voidable if I am or become disabled or incapacitated, or in the event of later uncertainty as to whether or not I am dead or alive. So basically, they are not legally responsible for your death. Like, it wouldn't be considered murder if you died because of a decision that they made, because you're gonna die one way or another. You are, like, so they can't be held responsible for that. Alright, here's where it gets real. Part 2, Healthcare Choices Directive. So this is where it's going to go through a list of different possibilities of things that would be life-sustaining treatments and whether or not you would want them or want them withdrawn. So let's read the little paragraph. I want those involved in my healthcare to understand my wishes if I cannot communicate or make decisions on my own. I make this directive to provide clear and convincing proof of my wishes and instructions about my healthcare treatment. If my doctor believes medical treatment will lead to my recovery, I want to have the treatment. I also want to have care and treatment for pain or discomfort, even if this treatment might shorten my life, affect my appetite, slow my breathing, or be habit-forming. So that's kind of hospice stuff at the end there, like comfort meds is what they're talking about, it sounds like. If I have a terminal illness or condition and there is no reasonable hope I will recover, or if I am persistently unconscious, I direct the following treatments to be withheld or withdrawn, initial and apply. So first is surgery or other invasive procedures. If your life is hanging in the balance at that point, surgery, maybe it's worth a shot, but it's probably going to cause you a lot more pain, discomfort, inability to spend time with your loved ones during that time. It's probably going to expedite everything. It's a lot harder to recover from things when you're that close to the end. Cardiopulmonary resuscitation, so CPR to restart my heart and breathing. So, being brought back after you're already basically gone. Whenever you're already basically gone. Antibiotics, they're trying to help something, but yeah, I would be okay with that. Dialysis, I don't know much about dialysis, but I do know that once you start, it's pretty hard to stop. It's even more trauma to your body. Medical ventilator, help with, this doesn't mean oxygen itself, tube, where it's just oxygen, but it does mean one that's actually forcing you to breathe. Artificially supplied nutrition and hydration, including tube feeding. We already talked about that. Chemotherapy, also more bodily trauma. Radiation, also more bodily trauma whenever your body's already on the edge of gone. And all other life-prolonging medical treatments or surgeries that are merely intended to keep me alive without reasonable hope of making me better or curing my illness or injury. Initials. And then my organ donation choices. Initial only 1. I consent to the donation of my organs or tissue. I realize that my body may need to be maintained artificially after my death until my organs can be removed. Or you can refuse to make anatomical gifts of part or all of your body, prohibiting your agent from consenting to such gifts after your death. I went ahead and put organ donation. I have learned that it's tricky. If it's super important to you, the thing you have to understand is that it means you probably need to die in a hospital, because if you don't, then your organs may not be usable because of the amount of time that's passed since you died. So just understand that if that's really, really something you want to do, you gotta know that. So, done with that page. Sign all my things. I also give the following directions regarding my healthcare. This page is where you can really, like, go deep on what you want to do. I'm not going to do that right now. I'm going to take some time to sit with that and think about that. And you can attach extra pages, but just make sure you sign and date them. One of the questions it brings up is describing what you consider acceptable quality of life. For example, being able to recognize your loved ones, make decisions, communicate, or feed you. Like, where is that line for you of what would no longer make life worth living that you can think of, you know? So just putting that down. I think that it's optional on this form, but I do think for whoever might have to refer to this form, it's super helpful. So, yeah. All right, so I'm to part 3 on the Missouri one. Part 3 is relationship between healthcare choices directive and durable power of attorney for healthcare choices. This part is effective only if I have completed part 1 and part 2. As I have executed the healthcare choices directive and durable power of attorney for my healthcare choices, I trust and encourage my agent to first follow my wishes as expressed in the directive or otherwise from knowledge about me or having had discussions with me about making choices regarding life-prolonging medical treatment. So this means my sister and I gotta have a really interesting conversation. But thankfully, we're kind of deathy folks. And I know that, like, not everyone will be stoked to have this kind of conversation, because it is weird and it's hard. There are things I've found that are helpful. There's a couple of decks of cards that are out there. I know one's called Heart to Hearts, and Go Wish is the other one. And they are designed to help with this exact kind of conversation. They have different situations on them, or like priorities on each card, and they can be used as tools to kind of like get a read for yourself, first of all, but also like to have something between you and the other person that you're having to have this conversation with that maybe can help ease the awkwardness surrounding it, to get more comfortable talking about it, getting comfortable with the uncomfortable. That's what death is all about. So, second, if my agent doesn't know my wishes for a specific decision, but my agent has evidence of what I might want, my agent can try to figure out how I would decide. This is called substituted judgment and requires my agent imagining himself or herself in my position. My agent should consider my values, my religious beliefs, past choices, past statements I've made. The aim is to choose as I probably would choose, even if it is not what my agent themselves would choose. That second one, it's that buffet buddy. Your buffet buddy. They know what you want, not what they would want. That's important stuff. Third, if my agent has little or no knowledge of what I would want, then my agent and the doctors will have to make a decision based on what a reasonable person in the same situation would decide. This is called making decisions in my best interest. I have confidence in my agent's ability to make decisions in my best interest if my agent does not have enough information to follow my preferences or use substituted judgment. And if this is the case, I authorize my agent to make decisions that might be even contrary to my directive in their best judgment. So, gotta have that trust. Buffet buddy. Buffet buddies. Finally, if the durable power of attorney for healthcare choices is determined to be ineffective, or if my agent is unable to serve, the healthcare choices directive is intended to be used on its own as firm instructions for my healthcare providers regarding life-prolonging procedures. So, I've traveled a lot. Say like something happens to me when I'm not at home, and they have access to this document, but not my family, for whatever reason, then this will be their guide. So see how helpful it is? It's super helpful. It makes me feel better that I'm actually getting this done. Relief. there's a sense of relief. Now we're down to part 4, execution. So this is the part I can't do right now because I have to have a notary. But other than writing out some more details about myself and what I want and the spirit of things, I'm done. That really didn't take very long. It doesn't. And you can change it You can change it anytime you want. It's your directive. You know, if you do change it, you have to get it re-notarized, but it's good to have that, and it's a good thing to review every year or so. Alright, so takeaways from our little exercise in deafiness today. I feel better for having actually sat down and done it. At the end of the day, I mean, I had to think about it for a long time, but when I actually went to do it for real, it didn't take very long at all. I know it also means I have to sit down with Audrey for real and actually talk about it. Who knows? I'll see if she'll consent to doing a video of that conversation, just so y'all can see the whole process. So, and yeah, it's not hard. It's not super hard. It's challenging. Like, to look at death is always there's gonna be a certain amount of challenge to that, but the actual doing of this thing is not very hard. It's pretty understandable. It's so windy. So yeah, that's advanced directives in a nutshell. I'll get to Kansas's here next, but I won't do that on camera. I think going through one is good. It's pretty similar. Kansas makes you write more out, where Missouri provided more of like a little checklist where I had to initial off on the different things. It looks like for Kansas I'm gonna have to like write it out. So if you're interested in filling out your advanced directive, clearly I'm a big fan of the idea. I'm going to make sure that I link some options as far as places you can go to print yours off for your state, read over it, take your time initially. Like, you know, like I said, I sat with mine for like a year. You got to figure out who that buffet buddy is. You got to sit with like different ways it might go down and what that might mean to you. You might have to like think about people you've lost and the situations you've seen them go through, and who you don't want involved. You also have to know that, you know, and you also are gonna have to talk to this person, whoever your buffet buddy is. You're gonna have to be like, hey, we need to talk about this, so you know what's up. You can do it. That's all I got. Happy All Souls Day, y'all. Like, remember your loved ones today. I'm thinking all about my mom and my dad and my grandpa and my grandma and some friends of mine that I lost along the way, and carrying them all right here with me. So, love to you. Good grief, as per usual. And I will hopefully get more videos out soon.